Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very special program today. I'm Kathy Perifimos, and I am a founding board member of Barnard Women in Entertainment, known as BWE. We are an inclusive alumni organization committed to helping each other grow and advance within the greater entertainment industry. And we're so happy to have you with us this evening. Before we get started, just a little note for our attendees. You will not have microphone or camera access during this event. Your voices, likeness, and/or images will not be captured by Barnard College. You may submit questions to be shared during the Q&A portion of the event, and you can do that via the Q&A feature in Zoom. We will then answer them at the end during the Q&A time. We also welcome you to continue this conversation by joining the BWE LinkedIn group after the event. And now I have the privilege of introducing our guests, Marissa Scher and Keith Endo. Marissa Scher, class of 2007, is a Brooklyn-based writer, graphic designer, and video artist who has studied art history, visual arts, and dance. She has worked as lead graphic designer for many film and television productions, including Joy, Gold, Alpha House, and The Jim Gaffigan Show. And she currently supervises the film unit graphic design team at Saturday Night Live. Her digital art has been featured by Infinite Objects, Studio As We Are, Art Point, and In Change, the permanent collection aboard the National Geographic Endurance. Keith Endo has been living in New York City for a little over a decade. He started his career working for numerous motion picture design studios before jumping into the film and television industry. He's worked on hit shows such as Netflix's Maniac, Inventing Anna, and Amazon's Hunters. He was also the graphic designer on the award-winning film Till, and he is also currently working as a graphic and motion designer on NBC's Saturday Night Live. And now I turn it over to you, Marissa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Kathy, and to the Barnard Alumni Association and to BWE for having us. We're so excited to be here tonight. We're Equity by Design. We're a group of IATSE 829 computer artists who came together in 2020 because we realized the biggest barrier to entry for our job is simply knowing that it exists. You'll see from our presentation, it's a very specific niche, and we all stumbled upon it from different paths. So our group now gives these free presentations to high schools, colleges, groups of professionals interested in changing fields. And we also mentor and teach classes through Free Arts NYC. And we're just trying to spread the word about our very special, very weird little job. So we are going to start with a video. Keith and I both work for Saturday Night Live, as you heard from our bios. So this just gives you a sense of how the film unit works, and then we'll jump into the presentation after that. Great. So that full video, it's from the Creating Saturday Night Live series on YouTube from about 3 years ago. So there are some things that are a little outdated, but it does give you a sense of just how crazy pants our job is in the film unit. And one major difference is that the film unit has grown so much. We now have our own building with our own sound stages that we build every set from scratch. That happened during the pandemic because we couldn't go to locations as much. There were just more restrictions. So I encourage you to check that video out. Hopefully we can share that in the chat. But now let me share my screen. Can we see that?
Yep.
Awesome.
Let's see it.
Okay, so what is a computer artist? It's a fancy word for graphic designer, or as we're often credited on screen as a graphic artist. And the name comes from us making art on computers, hopefully not to soon be replaced by computers, but we're happy to help them unionize if that does happen. And our union, IATSE 829 is the scenic union for the eastern region of the US. So it's mainly New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New England. And it covers art department work. So the art department is the place in a production that carries out the set creation for production. So the look and the setting of a film. And it's headed by the production designer or the set designer. And that's the person interfacing at the top level with the director. That's our big boss. And then the other categories that are covered by our union IATSE 829 are the art director. That's like the right hand of the production designer. Us, computer artists, we do all the graphics for the production, and the set designer, I know that's confusing, but they're also called assistant art directors. They do all the drafting, like the building plans. They're kind of the in-house architect. And then the set decorator and property master are actually a separate union. Those are high-level jobs, but they are covered in Local 52. The set decorator handles all the buying of the furniture and the set dressing, and then the prop master handles anything that the actors physically touch with their hands. And then we have the art department coordinator. And so that's kind of, they're like the office manager of the art department. And the art department production assistant, which was my road to set design, that's the non-unionized person who helps out with all the smaller tasks. And it's considered an entry-level learning position. So graphics falls into mainly 6 categories, and we'll go over these and even a few more in the presentation. So let's see, location graphics. Those are the big graphics. They're the signage, the billboards, the storefronts, the wall decals, kind of like the big set pieces that are really, really seen in a film. They have a huge effect. So this image is something I did for SNL. It's a faux neon sign that we made for a sketch where Kate McKinnon was playing Kellyanne Conway in 2016, which was my first season. And she was sort of being like a Roxy Hart type from Chicago. So we wanted to mimic the iconic Chicago neon sign. But neon takes a really long time to fabricate, and it's super expensive. And as you saw in that video, we basically have a day to do everything. So we faked the neon by printing this design onto a frosted plexiglass and then just putting light behind it. And obviously building a stage around it so Kate could dance. This is a location mock-up from one of my earlier jobs as a graphic designer in the film industry. I was the lead designer for Joy, which is a movie starring Jennifer Lawrence based on the life of Joy Mangano, who was the inventor of the first self-wringing mop. And a big QVC mogul, ultimately, a very cool woman. This is a location mock-up for her father's auto body garage. She was played by Bob De Niro. And often what happens is we get a picture of the chosen location. So this was in Boston, because this production filmed in Boston. And then we work with the production designer to create a mock-up in Photoshop to get the scene or the setting exactly as they want, so that then the art department can carry out this whole paint job and building this big neon sign. And I like this. It's my early work, so I look at it and there are changes I would make. But I really like this example because it shows how you can storytell through set design. So the film takes place in the 1980s, but we wanted a feeling of vintage decay to come through for it to have like this 1950s motif. So you can see all these faded old ad stencils that were purposely put there. And then, you know, the 1950s color palette, you've got this seafoam green. And then this like indecisive quality that comes through for Bob De Niro's character by the fact that you can see how many times he's like changed his business. And it was supposed to show that like he wasn't great at business and kind of the instability in Joy's home growing up. So And then here are just some shots of it in the film. Actually, the opening scene, the camera went right through this neon sign. So you can kind of tell how much of an effect graphics can have in certain films. Keith, you want to take it away?
Sure. Yeah. So this was from Till. It just premiered this past year. It tells the tragic story of Emmett Till and the story surrounding his mother, Mammy Till Bryant. And so this was the sign that we did a lot of research, and the storefront of Bryant's Grocery is where the incident happened. It's a very historical site, and so we had to recreate it. And sometimes working on film and television, we have to deal with budget, we have to deal with limitations to the locations that we shoot at, and there's a ton of other reasonings. But for this situation, we weren't able to recreate the balcony, as you can see on the picture on the left. We were planning to build it, but I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't high enough in the chain to know, but they had to cut the fabrication of that. So instead, they went with it just being on the facade of the building, which, it still captured the essence of the scene, but it was definitely a big part of that story, was this sign. And one of the things mentioned in the SNL behind the scenes was Scouts. And Scouts is where the heads of all the departments, props, set deck, art director, production designer, they all go to different locations that the locations department pull together. They look at the script and they go bowling alley. So they'll have a ton of bowling alleys in the area that the Scouts will go to, so that the director, producers, and everyone can see and feel out what will work for the script. And so here is one from Hunters that I did, where they went to one of these bowling alleys. They didn't like it initially because it was used in a bunch of other films during that time. And so they were afraid to use it. But our production designer said that he really wanted to use it because he loved the layout. And he came to me and said, can you mock up a mural to cover these walls? Because that's the reason they don't want to use it, is because it's that those stripes have been seen in a lot of other shows. And so I mocked up that design. I made a bunch of other designs to pitch, and the designer loved this one. The director loved it, and that's what made it into the show.
Cool. So on SNL, since we started doing all our own builds, when we stopped being able to use locations in the pandemic, backdrops became a big part of our world. So that's how we fake being outside or being in different locations. So usually on a Wednesday night, right after the scripts get picked and we have our production meetings, this is the first thing we have to take care of. And we're often photoshopping these, these have to be like 60 to 70 foot wide backdrops for cover. And so we Photoshop these into the night because our vendor that can print these at the scale is in Philadelphia, and it takes all day to print them because it's so massive. And then they send, a courier to New York City as soon as they're done, so we can get them Thursday night in time for the Friday shoot. So this was Chad on Mars, an SNL sketch that we did a couple years ago, I think. But yeah, it was basically a Marsscape, and you can see, the red lighting that was at and all the haze to kind of make this look less crisp. So set decoration, that's the next category. Set decoration is the smaller graphics that they're on the walls, bulletin boards. You can see this is, the massive wall of flyers that's so iconic in The Marvelous Miss Maisel, which was designed by a fellow Barnard alumna, Ariel Poster. She was the lead graphic designer for the first season of the show. And then also for Marvelous Miss Maisel, you can see they did a 1950s style subway. So because that doesn't exist anymore, they had to recreate These ads are from scratch. We use stock photos a lot of the time. So a lot of these are stock photos. And then everything like the maps and all these labels, this sign, all of that would have to be made from scratch because that location doesn't exist. So our job often involves a lot of research. These are just more examples of set deck graphics like record labels, book covers, posters, stuff that would go on a bulletin board or sort of like on someone's desk, you know, cards, tickets, just anything like that, documents a lot that are piled up. This is from Chills, so Keith is gonna take it.
So beyond, you know, paperwork and stuff like that, we call that GAC. It's short for global area coverage. It's just generic paperwork that we usually, when we read a scene and we know that it's going to be an office or a police department, we know they're going to want GAC to fill in the space. Where there's a lot of desks, they just want paperwork that's appropriate to the setting to fill in, so it makes it feel more real. So this was one from Till. It was the NAACP, and so we did a lot of like 1950s paperwork that would have existed during the time. We did a lot of research going through the National Archives, trying to make sure everything was like historically accurate, and because you never know if the camera is going to go up close to this stuff. You have to be careful not to put anything that's not real, or else you're going to look terrible and your production designer is going to be mad at you. so yeah. And then this was from another scene until it was the Marshallfield and Company department store. It was a real, I think it still is a real department store, but they wanted it in from the 1950s. I tried really hard to research and find images of that time, but it was impossible. And so I dug harder and I found 1920s to 1930s images, like really clear, beautiful, like design, graphic design. They had a beautiful like green color palette. And I said, you know, Kurt, this is what I can find. I think it looks cool. Is this okay? And then Kurt was like, I think that's fine. I think maybe this could be a thing where the design kind of stayed for a while with this department store, and so we'll like make it look a little bit more aged. And
yeah, I love that.
So yeah, so this is what made it into the scene.
So props, that's anything that a actor handles. Something that we do a ton of is photo compositions to kind of tell backstory. And these can be in the set decoration category as well. It just depends on if the actor picks them up. But what we'll do is receive photos provided by the actor, and then we'll Photoshop another actor in to make it look like there's history between them. So that's such a big storytelling tool in film and TV. On SNL, we do so many product commercials, parody products. So that's a big part of our work. So we're creating boxes from scratch. This was from a Halloween episode with Chance the Rapper, and it was kind of a knockoff Pop-Tarts commercial. So you can see that we do a lot of these product setups, and then, you know, the branding gets taken into post-production. And then we also do, in addition to made up products or products that are kind of based on a real product, we're amending a lot of existing products. So you can see these are all examples of products that are real in the world, but we're adding a joke to that, and then, you know, printing that out. Or even, I think we just put stickers on top of a real life game here. Other examples of props, vehicles, is that something, it is big, but that's something an actor handles. So we do a lot of, we call them vinyl wraps. These are 1960s graphics that I designed on a show. This is a fake soda brand that through the decades, newspapers, that's considered a prop. This was a Through Trump's Eyes skit that we did in 2016 after the election. Also this liberal currency joke, also in 2016. And we had to recreate the Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial. So we had to recreate all those signs, and the actors are holding them. So that's a prop. And then Keith, do you want to go into costumes?
Yes, costumes is the graphics that we create for the costumes department or wardrobe. They can be graphics for television. It can be hats. We do a lot of patches for uniforms, embroidered logos like this one for Chatham Mars. We do a lot of patterns. This one was for Till. This was an iconic photo of Mamie and Jean Mobley. This was a photo that we knew that they were going to recreate in the film. So day one, the costume designer reached out to me, and she was like, can you recreate this pattern that we can send off to our, I think, textile printer. I'm not exactly sure how they reproduce this garment, but so I quickly did this pattern. I had to wrap my head around how it could be seamlessly repeated across the fabric. So it took some time to figure that out. So yeah, this is the pattern on the left and the result on the right. We do a lot of playback, which is any graphics on set for filming. So, or on a screen, excuse me. It's a lot of motion graphics. So like if there's a computer, if there's monitors, if there's televisions, we do a lot of graphics for these specifically. So this was for Maniac that I did with Adam Brustein. It was a kind of retro futuristic show where they wanted a lot of like scientific graphs and things that like kind of made no sense, but also seemed very logical and complex. So I had experience as a motion graphics designer with some 3D and a lot of After Effects. So I did a lot of these graphs and we pitched it to the director. He loved them. And so we kept going, and these are the results.
Some of my favorites, like doing sort of sci-fi and vintage sci-fi looks like.
Yeah,
so much fun.
It's really fun. And on the other spectrum, we have just, very, generic, like basic, I guess. We do a lot of NYPD, a lot of hospital, a lot of political shows in New York City. So a lot of the times it's a lot of databases, it's a lot of emails, it's a lot of, very cut and dry graphics for these things. This was for the Equalizer. The one thing that I thought was interesting was that they had a huge screen for their lair where they figure out all the clues and stuff that happens throughout the season. And it was very intimidating going into this and helping out and trying to like make it look great, but also appropriate for the look and feel of the show.
Yeah, it's a lot of space to fill.
Yeah. Post-production is similar to playback in the sense that it is more motion graphics, but instead of it being used for the set, it's in post. So we work with the editors. We do a lot of title cards. We do a lot of lower thirds, do a lot of lyric animations. We do, we do green cards for the holiday episode where it's just, compositing people together and just animated on the screen in a nice way. I think Marissa, in the next slide, you did a lot of title cards.
Yeah, and we do title cards is a big thing that we do on Saturdays for the edits in SNL. And there's a big range there too. You can see like this was a recent sketch where we did a Christmas Carol style title. This was Women of Congress. It was kind of a Charlie's Angels parody. So, it has that 70s feel. And then something like this, Space Mistakes, which was, a joke about space movies. And we wanted to have like a slicker, more modern feel. And then this one, which is probably my favorite graphic that I've ever made. Because the thing I really love about this job is that you create beautiful graphics and you create an equal amount of like ugly graphics. And you can see like, this is probably the one that's the most complex. And it's just one of my favorite sketches too. It's very funny. So illustration, that's not everyone in our category does illustration. The same with motion graphics. It's not a requirement. It's sort of like a plus if you can bring in additional skills. So illustration is one of those two. And Lee McGee is our in-house illustrator at SNL. And so he, you can see how much he's chameleoning all the time. We have everything from Norman Rockwell style painting to comic book to Titanic style Kristen Stewart from a Totino's commercial. There you can see she's eating a Totino, to this is also Kristen Stewart, and I think they both are accurate likenesses. But yeah, there's just really a range here. And then we're doing more animation. And so some of these are parodying old animated shows. So Lee did the character design and a lot of the backgrounds and kind of the art directing for this middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles piece. And then this is from Tiny Horse. And Lee also does very quick storyboarding. That's basically like in the Wednesday night to Thursday range to just help the cinematographer and the director like get their head around what the shots are going to be. And then we also hired for this piece, which is very specific, we hired a stop motion animator, Cami Upton. And so all these close-ups are actually stop motion. And then the post team put a filter on footage of a horse. So it was like a big combo. And this is another one of my favorites, just very funny. And then concept art is kind of the last big category. Vicky Pui is one of our most talented concept artists in the union. It's basically for pre-production. So she's worked on Black Panther and Suicide Squad, and she's using Photoshop mostly to composite image photos and also do some Photoshop painting to help storyboard some of these scenes, because they're so epic, and at this budget you really need to do a lot of pre-pro before the filming starts. And then also in post-production, like for Aquaman, she was given the shots that they filmed, and then she had to kind of help add in the CG that they were thinking about doing before they spend all the money on the animators actually animating all of these creatures and that sort of thing. And she also worked on Lovecraft Country, and this would be pre-pro, for creating these really, really epic sets. So she's kind of working with the set designer here. So I think we have just enough time to jog through getting started in the industry before we jump into Q&A. So do you need a college degree? You don't, fortunately. It certainly helps if you have an art degree, but the way I came to this job was a bit more roundabout. I studied art history and visual arts at Barnard. I was also doing a lot of dance there and kind of doing my own experimental films on the side by the time I graduated. And so I wanted to stay in New York. So I got a data analyst job and then was trying to do my films on the side, but I just found that it was really draining and I really was bored at work. So I just knew that I had to find a job that was also creative. So I taught myself HTML, coding, CSS. I copied websites that I saw online. I learned Flash, and I started freelance web designing. And then eventually I got a job at a small boutique firm. That's where I learned a lot about typography. Again, all this was basically self-taught. And then I loved film. I was still making my own films and really focusing on the set design elements. Like I loved the costumes and the sets for the films. So I found my way to art PAing. I cold called a bunch of production design companies, and one of them happened to become my mentor. That was Andrea Persigliotti, who was in the film clip that we showed in the opening. She's our big boss at SNL. And I helped her out on anything I could, any non-union jobs that she was doing. And I learned from her, and she told me about this computer artist category. She said, if you want to be a set designer, you can get into the union. You already have the graphic design skill, so get into the union that way, and then it's easy to add additional categories. So that's what I did. I had to beef up my portfolio. I found indie film and student film projects. We'll show you a bunch of resources where that kind of those jobs are listed. And I just did all the graphics, for those, and while I was working a full-time job, and I wasn't really sleeping. But then I got into the union, and the amazing thing about the union is, that they set the rates. So a lot of us artist types are quieter and don't love negotiating. So that's a big thing for the unions. And then you also get benefits, which can be life-changing. So that was my road. Keith, what was your road?
My road was very different from yours. So I went to school for motion design, which motion design, it builds on the principles of graphic design, which helped me greatly for this field. And went to school for that, came up to New York, got a job at a small motion graphics studio. I stayed there for 8-9 years. And then I slowly started realizing, maybe this isn't for me, pitching to clients and not getting my ideas picked up. And so it's like, what am I, why am I creating this stuff for if it's just like sitting there and no one, I'm not getting the credit for it. It's just the company that I work for that's getting all the credit. And I had a friend who told me about film and TV. He's like, why don't you just go into film and TV? Because motion graphics is becoming bigger because there's more computer screens on set. There's more tech going into all these sets, and, motion design is becoming big. And so I looked into that, and, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this out. This looks like a lot of fun. And so I applied, I got in, and I haven't looked back. Every show or TV that I've become a part of, it's just something completely new. You can be doing like a 1950s period about, like I just did Hunters, which is about Nazis. It's like I'm never in my wildest dreams would I be creating Nazi, graphics and looking into the history of all that stuff, and then going to SNL and doing all these crazy sketches every week, or, it's just every job is so different, and you get to do research into that stuff and learn so much about the topic of whatever the show or film is about.
Yeah.
And so
it's always interesting. And I think autonomy is huge. It's like you're the graphic designer, you get a credit on the film or on the TV show, in a way that when you're working for a firm, you're just part of a team that's creating stuff.
Yeah, you have a big voice in the production of the film. Like you see your graphics up on the set. It's very rewarding.
Yeah. So essential skills, we mentioned Illustrator, Photoshop, Adobe software is really huge. Keith is using a lot of After Effects for MoGraph. And, typography is big, spreadsheets, we got to keep track of all the graphics in the script, all the changes, the schedule changes. And we'll share this document with you guys after. So you'll have it. Additional skills. Yeah, I think being a big communicator is huge. You can see like how many channels we are getting requests from. And so on SNL, I'm communicating via text, via phone call, via email, via Slack. People are coming into my office and sort of yelling down the hall. So it's a lot to juggle, and you have to kind of enjoy that element as well. And then these are resources. Please feel free to email me. You can send me a message on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook as much. So, I think most importantly, like if you're looking for, like I said, I started out with indie film gigs, which you don't need to be in the union for. These are two of the best resources. Mandy.com is like the Craigslist for film and TV projects. That's where I found a ton of my first jobs. And then ArtCube is art department specific listings. And then there's also like, I actually didn't learn on Photoshop. I learned on GIMP because I couldn't afford Photoshop. So there are free alternatives to Adobe programs. And then just graphic design resources, fonts and use is like a really big one we use. It just shows you decades with, you know, all the fonts that were in use during that time. But yeah, again, we will send this out. And then of course, look up IATSE 829. We can put the website in the chat. Actually, let me do that now, but let me stop the screen share. And I think we have a good amount of time for questions.
Okay, I am back, but my video is not, but that's okay. Here we go.
No worries.
No, here we go. Okay, great. So first of all, I just want to thank you guys so much. For those of you in the audience that don't know, I'm a production attorney and I didn't know so much of this, and it will actually make me better at my job. Because, and that's kind of the beauty of, I think, the entertainment industry, is that like everyone has their expertise, but you can't make something without everybody knowing what everybody else does. And it's so integral to my job to understand how programs and content are made. So this is huge for me. So, thank you. Yeah, no. Awesome.
And it starts to be very difficult to watch film and TV the same way once you know, like we can't, you know, look at a police office without kind of like having a bit of a heart attack, because there's so much gack, as we call it. There's so many like wanted posters and documents piled up. And yeah, there are just certain locations where we go, no.
You also, it's like also you have a more appreciation. Like you look at a set and look at how much went into it. Like, wow, look at that sign in the back that you can barely see. It looks amazing. It's huge, and so much work went into that. It's like things like that.
That reminds me, Annie Atkins is like probably the most famous graphic artist for film. She does all the Wes Anderson movies, and he has such a focus on signage and, you know, like really specific set design. So definitely check her out if you're interested in that kind of thing. But yeah, questions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, she has a bunch of YouTube videos online. She's very easy to look up.
Awesome. I love that aesthetic. Okay, we have a question, and I encourage the rest of you to chime in with some more, but this first one is interesting. So with so many departments coming up with so many different components, how do you keep a segment or episode on budget?
That is a great question. So for other film and TV gigs outside of SNL, usually the graphic designer is charged with like keeping track of the graphics budget and like calling, you know, we work with a lot of printers, fabricators, sort of different vendors that we are interfacing with directly. And so we need to get quotes, and we run those by the producers and or the art director. And there's a bit of a back and forth there. On SNL, it's such quick turnaround that element is kept track of more so by the producers. I do my best to get the quotes, but sometimes it's like we need this right away. And there's padding for SNL is such a specific animal. So there is padding in terms of like how quickly we need things, and sometimes we can't always check the price.
Yeah, and in other TV and film, it's all by a set list. So they'll read a script and then they'll create this list depending on the sets. Is it like a bank? Is it a gas station? Is it interior apartment? They list out all the sets, and then I believe it's the art director's job to look at every set and figure out the budget for those sets. And that keeps an organized list of how things are going. And so usually it's every week into production, they keep track of like, this set's coming up. We're going to need, we're going to need molding. We're going to need graphics for this. We're going to need lighting. We're going to need furniture. They keep track of all of it. And then as the production is going, they look at it by set and how much they're going over, how much they're under, and they can
relocate maybe
funds.
Like, on a regular film or TV production, like the budgets are approved maybe a week or two or to a month out. On SNL, it's like the producers turn their budgets in Thursday night, like at the end of the night. And then obviously stuff comes up on Friday. So it's just, it's a weird animal.
Yeah. Cool. So, how many pieces should you have in your portfolio when you're creating projects, and how do you decide what to show?
That's a great question. So to apply as a computer artist to the union, there's some specific requirements. So like you definitely should have a website, you know, with most of your work that you're proud of, but then to actually apply, you need to show that you know what the job of a graphic artist for the film industry specifically is. So there's also some practical testing, which involves a photo composite that the union actually provides 2 photos for you and says like, put these together in this way. And I think there's also a set mock-up, like a location mock-up, like I showed on my first slide, again, where they're providing the elements for you, and then they want to see how you put it together. And then on top of that, there's what's called a personal project. So that is, if you haven't already worked on a film, if you have worked on a film, you could show some larger branding or some object that you designed for that film as your personal project. But because I hadn't really done that yet, I hadn't worked on a big film, what I did was create a faux 1950s airline branding, and I showed them how I did research, and I showed how I came to the logo, the different iterations, and then how I put that branding, you know, on a mock-up of an airplane. I think I did some like onboard menus and also like a magazine ad. So, but it's really open-ended, like someone else did the Blitz cola cans that were in the presentation. That was actually someone's portfolio project. So making your own soda brand and then doing the different cans through the decades. And then he actually photoshopped each can into like a famous film from that decade. So like for the 80s, he added it to like a scene in ET. So it's really open-ended, and it's like a opportunity for you to do a project that's fun for you. And then, yeah, the committee looks at that and just assesses, you know, whether you're ready or not, and you're encouraged to apply again. I think the committee usually sends you feedback. And yeah, I think that answered the question. For your online portfolio, I think that's really like showing different skills sets, you know, like I also knew SketchUp. So that was something and I was interested in set design. So that was something I put on there, but then I also had like my web design work. So, and some of my experimental films. So it was a little all over the place. I think you never know who your work's going to touch. And when I reached out to Andrea, I think she appreciated that like I had all these really different facets in there. So.
And then, you know, union members are the judges on these exam panels. So I think I did one exam, I judged one where there was one artist who was really good. They had really great quality artwork, but they only had like 3 pieces in their portfolio. So we kind of didn't think that was all that great, and we wish they had more. So we didn't let them pass, but we gave them the notes, like, please come back with more so we can see more range of different project, you know, work that you have done. And that's what they did. And they got in the next following exam. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea about that process. Do you guys have websites that you can share with the group for people that want a model to work from?
You can look at our websites, and then I'll also provide a few other graphic artists that we work with and who have great portfolios, and you can just kind of see more examples, you know, because obviously we only included a few that we could fit into this presentation, but it's endless.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So another question we got is for recent college graduates, can you enter the business without having internship experience? It sounds like there are many different ways you can kind of enter the career. So
yeah, I think the best entry-level position into the film industry is as a production assistant, and every department has their own group of PAs. So for instance, I came right into the art department, but the general production office has their own PAs. And then like once you start to network with people, you can kind of move around. And, you know, like, let's say maybe you're interested in the lighting department or cinematography, you know, you go talk to the people in that department, and then on the next job, maybe they'll, you know, take you in as their PA. So it's kind of just getting a foot in the door. So I would say, you know, indie projects, because people start on indie projects and then they move into majors. So like looking at Mandy.com and ArtCube, if you're looking for art department, and just like wherever you can, starting to network with people. Just that's how you move around. And another thing that I think is important is, you know, in the film industry, like you might want to ultimately become a director or a writer or a cinematographer or a set designer, like, you know, something, the higher level credits that you see, you know, in the opening credits of a film. To get there, you really need to find a niche to get your foot in the door. So instead of going to film school, I really learned on the job. And that was great for me. I now have probably read hundreds, if not thousands of scripts for SNL, because we get so many every week. And I've seen how they develop. And like, so I know screenwriting very well. I'm in the room with directors. I see how they're making the choices. And then I'm on the set stage a lot of the time. So it's just, yeah, I think like if you're looking to be one of those voices, it just might take a little bit of finding something that's a little bit lower down to get your foot in the door. And then like you have access to a real life, you know, New York City or wherever you are classroom in the filmmaking industry. So.
Yeah, I think that advice really transcends like through all positions in the entertainment business. I think the key is to really just like immerse yourself into the world, get to know the players. And like you said, networking is everything. And so that's why we're here, BWE. So as soon as you graduate, please join, and hopefully you can benefit from our membership as well.
One thing I want to add to that is that look up in the credits, if you really like a film, look up who the production designer is, look up who the graphic artist is. They're most likely going to be on Instagram or some form of social network, you know, and I've gotten direct messages from here and there, you know, people really interested in like, hey, how do you do what you do? And like, what, you know, what can you, you know, what advice can you give me? And so things like that, I feel like, especially like production designers, I feel like they wouldn't mind like a polite DM, like just, you know, asking for helpful advice. I feel like that would be okay. Yeah, or an email or, you know, something. I feel, you know, that would be another great, you know, tip.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
No, that doesn't help. Not in this business.
Yeah, it's all networking.
Definitely. Okay, we have one final question. So what is the most stressful part of your job, aside from SNL, where the audience member imagines that the most stressful part is probably the last minute nature of it? But if it's not that, what is it? Or just in general and in other jobs?
Marissa, you can go first.
Yeah. I think that there are moments where it's so stressful here just because we have a day to do everything. And there are moments where it feels like we're working in a hospital or something. And you have to remind yourself that you're not, that, you know, it's film and TV. People's lives are not at stake. But that can be the level of energy at times. But I think the other side of it is that most people who are working SNL really like that element, you know, like this is the best job I've ever had. In addition to how many funny people I'm around and how I'm just around comedy all the time, I'm cracking up at scripts that, you know, we end up making, the ones that, you know, don't go to air or don't get picked. And, you know, that kind of transcends through the crew too. Everybody's just like really funny. And yeah, everyone kind of thrives on that energy of like, oh my God, this has to happen now, like not sleeping a lot, that sort of thing. And there's no way I can prepare for my job. Like when we go in Wednesday night, there's no way I can know what script is going to get picked and what I am going to be tasked with doing in the graphics department. So Sunday through Tuesday, and most of Wednesday, because the production meetings happen Wednesday night, like I can just do other things and just know that like when I'm in it, I'll be in it, and when I'm out, I'm out. How about you, Keith?
For me, like that, all that what you said is true, but I think the one thing I did not anticipate when coming into this union was the people, like the people you work with. You meet all types of personalities in this industry. A lot of them have inflated egos, and they can be a real pain to work with. They'll try and make you cry. They'll make your life miserable. But I think that's the one lesson I learned, was growing a thicker skin and just dealing with it. And it's just getting through it. And it's like, once I learned how to deal with that and that stress of just like running into, people that are hard to work with, it makes it easier. And then you're just like, it's just a job. They're as stressed as you, is what I realize. It's like, it's them just trying to deal with their stress, and they're just, trying to cope with it. And
and at SNL, that type of person doesn't really last long. That person gets weighted out, but it's
everyone at SNL is great. Like everyone's in the same boat at SNL. Everyone knows they're all going down towards that waterfall.
Yeah.
And then if they go over that they're all going down together. So it's all very understanding.
Yeah. But the other thing is that in the film industry, jobs are short term for the most part. There are shows like SNL where you keep coming back, or, a lot of shows that have many seasons or are long running. But a lot of them, a film, it's a set amount of time. So if there's someone you don't really get along with, like you just have to kind of get through it until the next job. And then, so that was nice for me. I think like that suited me a little bit more than normal 9-to-5 work. Was just like the changeover. It just like felt more exciting, and I never felt stagnant. But that type of industry attracts, like more of the weirdos, more of the people who are looking for something off the beaten path. So with that is great joy, and also a little bit of pain.
Awesome. Thank you. We've come to the end, but this was hugely helpful. I know the deck is going to be sent around. So if any of you come up with questions after that you wish you could have asked, just contact Keith and Marissa. I just saw one. Nope. Okay. That was just a thank you question. I want to thank everyone who came tonight. It's just so wonderful. We have such a wonderful community. I hope that we'll see you at future events, both in person now and virtual. So everybody take care of yourselves. And again, Keith and Marissa, thank you so much. This was amazing and exceeded all of my very high expectations for you.
Thank you so much for having us. And yes, I'm so excited for BWE to be coming back in person. So hopefully I will see you all at an event.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.